Your eyes on the times, you walk ready to speak up. But with so many problems, you're exhausted trying to keep up.
This is the Church Politics Podcast, where you can get political commentary from a biblical worldview. We're not trying to be conservative or progressive. We're trying to be Christian in the public square.
And I'm black as heaven. I'm made in God's image. Nobody can change my settings. Hey man, cut off my knees and put an end to my search. It's easy to sell your soul when you don't know what it's worth.
What you know, good, Ann Camp? You're listening to the Ann Campaign's Church Politics Podcast with Justin Giboney, a.k.a. Bishop Cooper's grandson. And I have a surprise for you. The Windy City representative, the baddest brother above the Mason-Dixon line, my play cousin, the Right Reverend Christopher Butler, came to visit us. And we told you he was going to come and be a guest on the show, but he is back because we couldn't talk about this. I mean, we went through the whole year talking about this, and so we got to end it, right after this election. We got to talk about this. Chris, what is going on with you, man?
Oh, everything. It is so good to be with you on the podcast for this very, very exciting conversation.
Yeah, man, I'm excited about the conversation. It's been crazy. I mean, we're both tired. We've both been up way too long, stayed up watching it way too long. But before we get into all the things that we got to talk about, tell me about tell the people about your new position, man.
Yeah, so it is, it's official. I'm the Director of Christian Civic Formation for the Center for Christianity and Public Life. So I'll be working with our good friend and co-author Michael Ware, just helping, coming alongside leaders in this civic space and public space, and helping them to really lean into their own spiritual formation and draw on the resources of our shared faith for the public good.
That's what's up, man. So I know that we'll all still be partnering and stuff like that. So I look forward to seeing you in that position and all the good that I'm sure you and our brother Michael Ware are going to do in that regard. Let me do this. We're going to get to it in a second, but let me take care of the business real quick. First and foremost, as always, if you're watching on YouTube, make sure that you like and subscribe. Thank all of you who support the AND campaign for what we do and how we do it. We greatly appreciate you, and that's why we got to make sure we get episodes like this out to you. But you can also support us, and we hope you support us. So you can become a patron if you go to patreon.com/churchpolitics. You can help us provide more content. Not only that, once you become a patron, you get premium episodes. So today I'm going to talk about how we should be reacting to some of these influencers are trying to get us to believe about this election. I think what some influencers are saying is not at all helpful. And so I want to help you guys work through that, but we'll be talking about that on the premium episode. All right. So you can also support us by going to andcampaign.org and just donating, become a monthly giver to join the movement. So I hope you all consider that, because we're getting some work done and we need your help to do it. We need you to be part of this movement and get up off the sidelines. All right. Well, y'all know what it is. Grab your Bible, get your mind right, and prepare to think not like a Republican, not like a Democrat, but to think like a Christian. And as always, there's no better place to start these conversations than in the Word of God. And so I'm going to go to Hebrews chapter 13. I'm going to do part of verse 5 and then verse 6. And it says this: "Never will I leave you, never will I forsake you. So we say with confidence, the Lord is my helper. I will not be afraid. What can mere mortals do to me? I will not be afraid." Chris, I remember when I heard Trump was running again, and I just wanted to be over. I thought it was over with. We can all move on. All the stuff that comes with Trump running. I remember just being kind of like distraught, just almost sick, and like, I don't want to have to go through all this stuff again. He ends up running. I mean, this, as far as our lifetime, I don't know a presidential election that was more of a roller coaster, just a complete roller coaster. And I know there are a lot of people out there listening to us right now, Chris, that are probably hurting. And so I want to know you all to know that we'll be praying for you. And also, we're at the end of this episode gonna give you a different focus, because we're gonna make it all. We're all gonna make it through this. And y'all know I wasn't really excited about either candidate, but we are gonna make it through this. And as always, me and Chris got to talk about it. But fear not. Do not let anybody give you a spirit of fear. Okay, that's really, really important, and I want you guys to know that. All right, let's get into what happened last night, Chris, because this was pretty wild. It was pretty wild. Many people thought this was going to be too close to call. We thought it would be Thursday or Friday before we could even have a real conversation about who won. But it was really, Trump blew it out. Yeah. Originally, everybody's eyes were on the swing states, right? Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, North Carolina, Georgia, Nevada, Arizona. Everybody's looking at those. Yeah. Then they're saying, okay, well, let's look at the blue wall. At very least, Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania, she holds those. She's good. He blew all that stuff up. Blew it up. And he improves his numbers. From what I can tell, he improves his numbers when it comes to minority voters. So I want to read off some of those numbers to you, okay? Chris, as far as the black vote, in 2020, he got 14.6% of the black vote. This time he got 20.4%. That's not, that 6-point move is a big deal. Yeah. Even with black women, he went from 6.9 to 11.9. So he goes up 5 points with black women. Black men, the first 2020 was 23.8. This time was 30.7. All right. Let's go to Hispanics. Hispanics in total, he went from 34.8 to 41.1. With Hispanic women, he went from 29.6 to 31.2. With Hispanic man, and this has really been the biggest story, although all of this is significant to me, he goes from 40.7 to 50.8, over a 10-point swing within that community. Let me read you a few other things, though. So this is as up, not all the numbers are in. We know who won, but there's still numbers coming in. So when you hear this, take it with that in mind. Look what he even did in blue states. So in 2020 in New York, it was Democrats plus 13. This time in New York, it was Democrats plus 12. In New Jersey, it was Democrats plus 16. This time in New Jersey, it's Democrats plus 4. In Massachusetts, it was Democrats plus 33. This time it was Democrats plus 26. In Rhode Island, it was Democrats plus 23. This time it was Democrats plus 13. In Connecticut, it was Democrats plus 20. This time it was Democrats plus 8. In Vermont, it was Democrats plus 36. This time plus 32. In Maryland, last time plus 33. This time 22. And in Delaware, it was plus 19. This time plus 14. To have that type of movement in blue states is crazy. To get the numbers that we just named when it came to the racial numbers is significant. Chris, what in the world happened, and what message should we take from what the American people said with their vote this week?
Yeah, you just read so many, really stunning numbers, and I think that the question is the right one. Like, what is the message that we should be taking from this, and really the Democratic Party should be taken from this, and I think what I'm more clear about is what the message should not be. If you look at this and you take from this only that, like the scope and range of moral failing all over the country is more severe, right? That Donald Trump won because now even more people are misogynist and racist and bigoted and uninformed or underinformed. If that's the lesson that you're learning from this, I think you're learning the wrong lesson. I think that there are people all over this country, and who have had experiences not only in the past 4 years. I think you got to back up and look over maybe the past 50 years, or really even more than that at this point, because we keep getting older every year. But for a long time, folks have been a community of people have looked to a certain set of leaders, Democratic leaders, and sort of Democratic liberal policies to affect change in their lives, and haven't really seen that. They've seen their cities go from bad to worse. They've seen generation after generation of children of color be failed by large unit public school districts all over the country, and so they joined a coalition of people rejecting that kind of leadership. And I think that if you assume that in the kind of election that we saw yesterday, where you see that kind of movement, and with that kind of movement, you see the kind of I mean, if anybody's listening to this, just pull up the map right now and look at all the red. This was a coalition win, and you can't assume that every member of that coalition is in the coalition for the same reason. And I think that if you continue, anybody who continues to paint with a broad brush and say that that the only reason this happened is because people don't understand how bad Donald Trump is, people don't understand what a threat he represents, I think that you'll be setting yourself up for even more difficulty in 2028. Donald Trump won't be eligible to run for president. It's way too early to start be thinking about 2028. But I do want to, just in terms of learning that lesson, you have to think about in 2028, an 18-year-old first-time voter won't have any memory of a pre-Trump world. And so it'll be really on these policy questions. And you may have candidates who have very similar policies and not as many of the personality hangups.
Yeah.
What are you going to do? But I think that the lesson that we've got to learn is the lesson that really shaped the fundamentals of the race the whole time. And I'll talk more about this when we get into the next segment. But the lessons that we have to learn should be shaped by those fundamentals, that people have a lot of difficulty, and I would even say pain, in their lives and in their experience.
Mm-hmm.
Even those who are, because I want to be sensitive to people who are, feeling some pain and in some in a kind of a state of lament this morning. And I know that there are those people. I'm not among them. It was pretty obvious to me very early in the night that my candidate was not gonna win.
Shout out to Pete.
That electoral college victory that I was looking for Peter Sonsky did not manifest, and that was pretty clear early in the night.
I think it sounds like one thing you're saying is don't be quick to try to make the reason for this fit your narrative.
Yeah.
And what I see a lot of people doing on the internet is, my narrative is, if she don't win, everybody's this or everybody's that. Take your time. Most folks ain't even really looked at the data yet, especially your favorite influencer. And I'll get more into that in the premium episode. And just chill. It may not fit your narrative. I want to see the number of how many of the people that voted for Trump this time actually voted for Obama before.
Yeah.
I think you're going to find that millions of people who you want to fit into your narrative probably voted for Obama the first time. So maybe it's not as simple as some of your favorite influencers want to say. That
numbers are probably higher for Bernie, right? Like,
yeah, right, exactly. Let me say this one message that I received from the people from this, what happened last night, was we're not listening to mainstream media at all.
Yeah.
All the big issues that popped up in the last few weeks or whatever, they didn't. I mean, it's like they completely ignored all that stuff. I mean, when you just look at the numbers, all the different narratives that are being pushed by mainstream media, they did not listen to it. Even, you know, when the Nazi stuff comes up and you have people just didn't. There's such a lack of credibility when it comes to that stuff, right? It's almost like The Boy Who Cried Wolf. I just think people don't listen to it anymore. Like they're numb to it because you done it too much. It's like a one trick pony. That's all you're doing, and people are just like, I'm done. So that's one thing that I took. Number two, and we talked about this before. Demographics or demography is not destiny.
Yeah.
Just because a certain group supports you now doesn't mean they're going to continue to support you, which I think is a good thing. And I always thought that was a lazy, we have more minorities, so we have to own the future regardless of what we do. No. Right? You're going to have to work for that vote, and we should want people to work for that vote, okay? Two, I think the establishment, and I won't get too far into this, but the establishment, they basically said, hey, we're going to move away from the establishment. That's not just the Republican establishment. I mean, the Democratic establishment, that's the Republican establishment. I mean, you got folks walking around with Cheney. I still don't understand how many people you thought were going to vote for you because you're walking around with Liz Cheney. I just don't. Yeah. I mean, maybe I'm missing something. I just didn't get that. Then something else, issues that folks that don't matter to some folks matter to others in significant constituencies. If you go up to Michigan, a lot of Muslims said, I'm voting either for Trump or I'm voting for Jill Stein. Mm-hmm. And that hurt. Yep. Right? Because of what they feel is going on in Gaza and beyond. And the response that they got. So there's a number of messages that were here. Are people going to listen? The point of this particular part of the episode is to say, what are the people saying? What should you hear? Not what your favorite influencers are saying, but looking at the numbers, what does it seem like people are saying? And it was crazy. I mean, there was some polls, like the polling at the end got crazy because they started hurting. So basically what happens when you get close to an election, especially after 2016 and everybody got scared because they were so off, all the folks start coming together and trying to play it safe. So all the polls start to look just alike because nobody wants to be the outlier that's out there looking crazy. And so the numbers, although many of them had Trump up, in a lot of the swing states, I don't remember any of them that had him winning the whole blue wall. I mean, that was maybe Rasmussen or something like that got it. There might have been a few, but most of them did not have that. And so the polls, again, to some extent, were a bit off. Anything else to add to that, Chris?
Yeah, I think it is two things that are worth saying. One, you have to receive from this a message of a Trump mandate. I think if you go out and win the presidency, the Senate, we don't have the House yet, but I think that if you won the popular vote and already picked up the Senate, losing the House is getting less and less likely as those races come in. And if you sweep like that, that's a mandate. That is the people saying, we want to see this guy try his approach. The other approach we don't think is working. We want to see him try his approach. And I say that because I think that anybody who's out there thinking that the way to react to this is for people who work inside of government in unelected positions to resist the president of the United States or the president-elect, I think that is a wrong way to interpret this. This is a pretty clear mandate from that perspective. The flip side of that coin is that you also have to receive the message that there are communities in this country that are hurting and that don't feel good and safe and heard this morning.
Yeah,
I would be remiss not to mention the 90+% of Black women who voted for Kamala Harris and see Donald Trump get elected. there are, LGBTQ communities, there are undocumented immigrants who are still, like, these are still people inside of our communities, right? Like, not even in our nation, like they're in our communities where we live and work and do our thing.
That's right.
And they also have spoken in this election, even though they did not win. When you see high concentrations of people voting for the losing candidate, I think it is important, and I hope that this helps to. I hope that this is factored into the governing philosophy.
Yeah.
That there are communities in this country that still need outreach and still need listening, and need to be brought into the national conversation. But we need to have special attention. Those of us who are working on the ground in communities around this country need to also be cognizant of the folks who spoke on the on the losing side of the ledger.
Yeah, no, for sure. And here's two things that some people may find as a silver lining. Number one, well, let me get to the silver lining next. Let me say this first. One of the wishes that I had for this election was that whoever won would win the popular vote. Remember saying that? Because I didn't want to have this whole discussion like it got stolen, right? I didn't want the whole it got stolen. So Trump does win. Surprisingly, it's crazy. Surprisingly, Trump wins the popular vote. I don't think hardly anybody had him definitely winning the popular vote. The other thing that may be a silver lining to pro-life people is that abortion wasn't the number one issue. Women, as we can see in the numbers, didn't just vote on that as the only issue that they cared about, which a lot of people were predicting would be the case. Now, I'm sure it was a serious issue for a lot of people, but based on the numbers and the votes that he got from women and how he went up almost in every category, abortion was not the issue that they were voting on. And that was really, in a lot of ways, what Kamala was banking on.
Yeah.
Something else that I'll point out is that gender divide was pretty big, and men did come out to vote. Now, if you say for the right or the wrong reasons, I'll let you guys have that debate. Men did come out to vote. And let me say this, another silver lining. So one silver lining is the abortion part. Another one, I want to give a shout out to the people in North Carolina. You don't have to agree with the outcome, but the way that they made sure that the people who had their lives disrupted by that storm were able to vote, Democrat and Republican, was great. Like, that's what democracy is supposed to look like. It wasn't about party. It wasn't about any of that. These folks had their lives disrupted. And from my understanding, they went above and beyond to make sure that those folks, again, in very rural places, then Asheville, that all of them had an opportunity to vote. And that's what we should all be about. So I did want to give a shout out to that. We will be right back on the Church Politics Podcast.
Your eyes on the times, you walk ready to speak up. But with so many problems, you're exhausted trying to keep up.
This is the Church Politics Podcast, where you can get political commentary from a biblical worldview. We're not trying to be conservative or progressive. We're trying to be Christian in the public square.
And I'm black as heaven. I'm made in God's image. Nobody can change my settings. Hey man, got off my knees and put an end to my search. It's easy to sell your soul when you don't know what it's worth.
All right, guys, we're back. And again, this was, I think we're still processing it. Now, keep in mind, as me and Chris talk about this, there's numbers still being processed. There's a lot of analysis to come, that we still haven't figured out. But I do want to kind of touch on where the left and the establishment went wrong. The realest quote that I've heard so far in this regard came from Claire McCaskill, who was a former senator Claire McCaskill, who said, Democrats are going to have to admit that Donald Trump understands the American people better than we do. There's going to be a lot of cope, Chris, about what happened. And cope is basically a way of trying to deal with an issue without really dealing with it, right? Finding a reason to not admit what was really going on. That's what they call cope. Your favorite people on cable news your favorite partisans on social media are going to be giving you cope probably for the next month or so, if not for the rest of the year. This is one of the realest statements that I've seen. I got a whole lot of issues that I've listed over and over with Donald Trump, and why this presidency does in some ways scare me, what could happen here, right? I'm not going to be afraid, but there are definitely some things that I'm concerned about. But the one thing, so I think that's a huge matter. Like, there's something that the left and the establishment is missing about how people think. One of the ways that you can see this is in that transgender ad that Trump put out. I saw so many people on the left laughing at that ad. Like it was just you know what I'm saying? Like, oh, well, it was mean or whatever, but it's silly. They really think people care about that. People care about that. Like it was such an absurd thing. It made you wonder, I'm not really connected with this group because it was such an absurd comments that were made and such an absurd policy. Right. And so I think a lot of people did react to that. And Claire McCaskill, they need to listen to what she's saying because she is on to something in that regard. You ain't got to like Trump, but in some way he knows how to connect with people. That's just one of his gifts. All right. The other thing I would say is where they got something wrong is you built the campaign in part, at least initially, on democracy. You did not model democracy very well yourself. Number one, you avoid a primary for Trump. You avoid a primary for Kamala. You kick people off a ballot. You're going out of your way to kick people like RFK, right, and others off the ballot, so they can't be on the. How is that democratic? Right? You don't model democracy, but yet you're coming at people for those issues. But go on. What did you see, and what do you think they missed, and why they ended up in this place?
Yeah, I mean, I think that they missed a ton. You know, starting from where you are, I think that essential question of democracy, and I believe I've said this on the podcast before. There are a lot of people in this country who look at two sort of threats to democracy and not just one. And right. The Trump sort of threat to democracy is the threat of kind of autocratic dictatorship, which, as much as you try to stoke that fear, it's a kind of difficult thing to do because we have a system of government that is designed to reject and repel autocratic dictatorship. But then there is a threat to democracy, which I don't think that Donald Trump is excluded from this, by the way. But it is not what people say about him. The people who are trying to defeat him politically don't talk about this part. But there's a threat to democracy that comes from a kind of economic elitist oligarchy, right, which our systems are not at all well designed to repel. Mm-hmm. And so the Democrat style of subversion of democracy is much more real in the minds of people because you really can just kick the sitting president off the ticket after he's gotten all the primary votes and put the vice president on with no primary. And there's nothing in the system to stop you from doing that.
And who did it? Who got to decide that?
Right.
It was the elites.
Yeah.
Right? You got a group of people who came together and say, we're in the position just to put this person here who has received no votes. Now, I know folks are hurting and you know, I understand that, but I want people to be honest right now because it's over. That was not cool. But go ahead, Chris. I cut you off. Go ahead.
Yeah. So one of the things that you're seeing is not Donald Trump winning, but Donald Trump doing a lot more, a lot better with these voters. You know, what did he get? I just had it. You know, he got 34% of voters who said that they were extremely concerned about democracy as their number one issue. And I think that you have to pay attention to the fact that you yourself represent a threat to democracy when you put yourself forward as this kind of elitist oligarchy. Because when people think about this, our systems are so much more susceptible to that style of subversion of democracy than they are to repelling autocratic dictatorship. You got to go very far in your imagination to really try to convince yourself that Donald Trump is going to come in, turn the military, turn the Supreme Court, turn like all the stuff that you have to do to accomplish autocratic dictatorship. Is it impossible? Maybe not, but much more likely that this other version of it will prevail. So that's one thing that I really hope people pay attention to, is that people want democracy in this country. They don't want autocracy, but they also don't want oligarchy. And then the next piece is that, McCaskill said that Donald Trump understands the American people. There is a slice of the traditional Democratic base that Donald Trump has spoken to in a way that the Democrats have not been able to speak to them. And you just go over this whole election, and you see polls that say, black men are moving toward Donald Trump. And the Harris campaign comes and says, okay, well, we're going to, legalize abortion, and
Legalize weed,
legalize marijuana, and do some stuff on cryptocurrency. And it's like, do you really think that those are the things that like black men are really concerned about? The trans ad, they never responded to the trans ad as if that's just like normal and acceptable and everybody's going to go with it. Even with women, you have this terrible experience of the economy, and you're like, okay, but all women are going to vote on the abortion issue because moms are not concerned about the cost of groceries and the performance of public schools. They're going to set those things aside and just think about abortion. And I think that's a misunderstanding. And then the last thing I want to point to is the abortion politics here, because I think that for those who are committed to a pro-life and a whole life ethic, there are some silver linings in this, because a lot of people didn't vote first on the abortion issue, and so the more pro-life, if you think, I don't want to call him more pro-life candidate at this point, but the Republicans won the election. You had a good vote in Florida, but I think that the morality of life took a hit last night because the politics of abortion, I think Trump outmaneuvered them on the politics of abortion, because they went and the Democrats put all these abortion referendums on ballots. And then Trump switches his messaging to, hey, just leave it to the states. And I think those two things combined to create kind of a permission structure for people who are pro-abortion, but also wanted to vote for Trump. It's like, I can vote for this referendum and secure this abortion freedom, and I can still vote for Donald Trump. And so I think the politics of that favored Trump. I think he outmaneuvered them on the politics of abortion. And I think because of that, we need to be vigilant in terms of the morality of abortion, because the politics of abortion have kind of shifted in this election and in these results away from taking any kind of a principled or moral stance on abortion and just doing this clever political maneuver to create that permission structure.
Let me tell you something else. I think you're right there. Let me tell you something else I saw from the beginning. So I've said from the beginning, as far as on paper and resume, Kamala Harris has one of the best resumes you're going to find. You cannot say that on paper she wasn't qualified from I've been the AG. You know what I'm saying? Like, she had those. She's been a senator, all these things, right? However, we have both always said she was not a good candidate. Her inability to kind of think on her feet and answer questions hurt her. I mean, but people knew this. What was amazing to me, Chris, was that people knew even when she was the vice president, before she was the candidate, that she struggled in communication and just wasn't doing a good job with that. People knew it. I mean, I'm talking about some of my most Democratic friends were like, dude, this is terrible. Yeah. Right? However, when she became the candidate, it all faded away. And somehow people started projecting everything they wanted in a leader onto her and really started believing it. Yep. And it was like, no, you still have a candidate that struggles to articulate herself in interviews. You still have a candidate who people don't know what she believes.
Yep.
Outside of the abortion thing and the transgender, I don't know. I was never clear on exactly what she believed. People knew this before she was the candidate. Can you explain to me the psychology of not realizing that once she becomes a candidate, we believed what we wanted to believe? I mean,
which is the danger of like throwing away democracy in the primary process, because one of the things that the primary does is it forces somebody to prove that they can win an election outside of their state. Kamala Harris never won an election outside of the state of California. And a primary process gives you an opportunity to say, hey, look, I can win an election outside of the deep blue state of California. And I know that because I look at, I was fairly close to the Obama ascendancy. And one of the key tests that sort of tipped the thing is how he performed in Iowa, because that says this guy can win an election somewhere different from his home state. And so when you skip the primary, that's what you end up with.
That's what you end up with. And then another thing that we've been talking about for a while is I understand where progressives are coming from with their protection of women, and I think they're right. If you look at the history of this country and how women have been treated, it's been terrible. From franchise to a number of issues, you cannot be truthful and deny that women have been mistreated in America.
Yep.
And there are still things that need to be corrected. However, somehow they manage, especially on the far left, to always go too far. Not really fixing the issue more, but pushing it to a point where it actually backfires. Pushing it to a point where you can't even see the fact that a lot of men, too, are struggling, not going to college, don't have jobs, are dying of deaths of despair, right? And in MAGA America, you see some men, their life expectancy is actually going down. And you're so ideological about the leftward feminist stuff that you can't account for the problems that men are having at all. Like, and the attempts to do it were just half-hearted and not believable. And people see that. Now, with all the stuff we're saying here, we're not saying that the Republicans do it better or that Trump did it better, but we are trying to give you what a lot of Americans might have seen that made them go the other way. And I think that's one of those. They've got to find a way to connect, to take care of the issues that we have and taking care of women, because those are real. And also not go so far with the rhetoric that you end up really looking like you could care less about men.
Yeah. And I think that, in addition to thinking about men on that, when you take the complex history of the United States and the complex experience of women today in the United States, and you reduce the concept and the idea of protecting women and moving women forward, and you reduce that to abortion, I don't know that for a lot of women, sort of women's rights and women's advancement has its fullest and most robust expression in pro-abortion politics, especially when the same party is comfortable. This is why, that trans ad that the Trump campaign put so much money behind, I think that's going to be one of the things that people talk about in the long-term analysis here, because the same party that said, I'm going to protect you and by giving you the right to an abortion is saying, I'm not going to protect you from having biological males competing in your athletics and competing with you for all of this stuff that if women are trying to um, uh, uh, advance. And I'm actually taking this directly from a woman who I've worked with for years and is now writing and advocating in this space. If women are trying to advance, is it not somewhat counterproductive to then begin to allow biological men to come into the space of women and begin to like consume like the resources and the air, that's coming in there, because it's an open question, an interesting question. I'm not taking one position or the other, but I know people who were in Democratic politics and left leaning politics as primarily as feminists who are now basically on the right.
Right.
And that's something that the left and the Democratic Party is going to have to reckon with.
Because how do you really protect women when you refuse to define what a woman is? You really, if you ask them what a woman is, you have people, they're forcing their candidates. And this is they're pushing their candidates into a place where if somebody says, what is a woman? They can't answer the question.
Mm-hmm.
You don't want to win. And I think that was one of the failures of Biden's administration, which I think is underrated. I think we're going to look at this and say it was terrible. I don't think that was a terrible administration. They got some things wrong. That wasn't a terrible administration. That's my point of view. But one of the things they got wrong is I think people put them in there to be normie, right? They said, okay, we're tired of all this stuff with Trump and all that stuff. Just be normal. And he let the left just do whatever it wanted on a few issues. And I think that ended up hurting him.
I think so. I think we probably won't look back and say that Biden's presidency was terrible, but because he was put in there to restore normal, he did not restore normal.
He did.
And then he raised the bar on himself and started comparing himself to FDR. And when you look at the vote totals, we don't have the total numbers, but right now you're looking at 2020. Joe Biden got over 80 million votes. Right now, Kamala Harris is just over 60 million. So you're going to see Donald Trump.
She got almost 20,000, 14 million votes less?
Less. So this is some of this. I mean, if you see Trump increase his overall vote count by, 3 million, 4 million, and Kamala Harris lose 15 or 16 million, there's an argument here that says this election is not lost to Trump as much as it is to non-participation from people who had been in the Democratic coalition. And I think a lot of that goes back to, if you look at the first 2 years of this administration, and I'm not ever going to say, let me say what I'm ever going to say. I won't say today that it's a terrible administration, but I am highly, highly, highly critical of a person who got elected and put himself up as the next FDR and then went forward and in the first 2 years of having the House and the Senate did not do any voting rights. Now you want all the black people to come out and vote for your candidate, but in those 2 years you didn't do voting rights. You didn't get that John Lewis bill through the legislature and sign that thing into law. You wrote back the child tax credit that had halved child poverty. You didn't make any significant consequential improvements on the Affordable Care Act, which is something that, good piece of legislation, but certainly needs its own improvements. And so you didn't go big the way that you projected that you might. And to me, that was a major problem, because now you can't point back and say, yo, black community, we got the John Lewis bill done, right? We made permanent this child tax credit. You didn't see any courage to do something big and bold on public education, which is a huge issue for a lot of people of color in large unit school districts all over the country. And so you don't have a terrible administration, but I don't know that we'll look and say that Biden's administration was great by any stretch.
He missed the bar that he set. I think that's fair. I just want to say the CHIPS Act. I mean, there were things that he did get done. Gets out of Afghanistan, right? I mean, there were things that happened that he did do. They missed too. I mean, I think the war in Ukraine and many other things. How he's dealt with Gaza. I think Right. There's a lot of different ways that he could have done better. I don't disagree with you. I just didn't want to bash it so much that we didn't look and say, well, no. There were some quality things that happened there. So we will be right back on the Church Politics Podcast.
Your eyes on the times, you walk ready to speak up, but with so many problems, you're exhausted trying to keep up.
This is the Church Politics Podcast, where you can get political commentary from a biblical worldview. We're not trying to be conservative or progressive. We're trying to be Christian in the public square.
And I'm black as heaven. I'm made in God's image. Nobody can change my settings. Hey man, got off my knees and put an end to my search. It's easy to sell your soul when you don't know what it's worth.
So, Chris, the next question I think we have to ask is, where do we go from here? The Democratic Party, I don't know if they're going to be honest with themselves and admit what Claire McCaskill told them to admit or not. The Republican Party still has a Trump problem, even though they won here. I don't know that there's a whole bunch of people. I don't know that there's a whole bunch of people that can pull that off that are not Trump.
Yeah.
Right. So the Republicans could take too much from this, right, and feel like they got it made when actually this was a Trump thing and a moment thing, and where Democrats messed up. So I don't know that all this realignment is set. Maybe it could be to some extent. I don't know that it is necessarily. The biggest thing I want to say to the people that are hurting right now, we've been talking about that. We gave you a scripture, Romans 13, 5 and 6. Because we mean that. We know people are hurting, and there's nothing wrong with, I'm not going to tell you can't be hurt about this. We are going to tell you to, as we said before, make sure you are opening your eyes and not just trying to fit this into a narrative. But I want to say even more, and this is something AND Campaign is going to be helping people have on-ramps to. Turn your view away from electoral politics for a moment and look around at your community, look around locally, to see who you can partner with and see what you can get done in your community, in your area. For folks who are in a city where AND Campaign has a chapter, you're going to have an opportunity to do that. I'm determined, Chris. I don't know that I've ever been more determined. I'm determined to pull the church in Atlanta and other places together and say, we're going to do something for this community. We're going to be a model of unity. The nation's going to need a model of unity after this election. There are going to be people who are doing everything they can do to be as divisive as possible. I'm determined, and with God's help and with prayer, to bring the church together to get some things done in the community. And that's what I would encourage all of you. That's where I would encourage all of you to put your focus right now. If you're upset, okay, guess what? You still have agency. There's a lot of things you can get done. Just change where you're looking. Trump doesn't control every single thing, and that's the beauty of federalism, right? He don't control every single thing in your local community and probably ain't trying to. Get some work done. Mm-hmm. Chris, what do you say?
Yeah, I mean, I think that is exactly it, and I think that the emphasis for me is on the unity question. It is because what we need in this country is healing. If you look at this election, the folks who won or voted for the winning candidate really were voting out of their pain, right? They have experienced what they interpret as rejection and being overlooked, forgotten. They have suffered, and so they kind of respond to that kind of American carnage pitch. And so you got folks who voted out of their pain. And then you have a community of folks who did not win the election, and they too are in pain. Some in experiencing a real sense of fear and foreboding of what these next years will bring. And so to the church, I would say that this is our opportunity to bring hope and healing to a nation that needs hope and healing. And the way you do that is by bringing hope and healing in your own community, in your own city, in your own state, by joining together with folks. And I would love to see it happen in interesting coalitions. Back in COVID, Justin, you led us in the AND campaign to do the Churches Helping Churches effort. Those types of things really matter, because Jesus said that they'll know that we are Christians, that we are followers of the Christ, the Messiah, the one who is the anointed one and has healing. They'll know that by the love we have for one another. So I would really urge that if, after processing for a minute, because you might be in a difficult place today, but after processing for a minute, if you find that you cannot embrace a Christian brother or sister simply because they voted for somebody different than you in this election, I would suggest that says more about your spirituality and spiritual condition than it says about theirs. And so would just urge us to come together as the people of God and be the kind of people that we would hope to be in these next years. And maybe even I should say it this way, be the kind of people that we would hope our political opponents would be, right?
That's good. That's good.
Let's be that kind of people.
Well, as always, man, thank you for coming back. We appreciate you, man, and wish you the best on your new endeavors. But I wanted to bring us back together to at least talk about the end of this campaign season. I got to go off, guys. I gotta record this premium episode. So I'll see y'all later. And you know what it is, folks. And Camp, there's a cross that neither political conservatism nor progressivism is fit to bear. There's a civic hearing in need of faithful witnesses who love social justice and won't surrender the truth to be loved by the world. Politic with the boldness and compassion of Jesus Christ. Until next time, and Camp, I'll holla at you.
Your eyes on the times, you walk ready to speak up. But with so many problems, you're exhausted trying to keep up.
This is the Church Politics Podcast, where you can get political commentary from a biblical worldview. We're not trying to be conservative or progressive. We're trying to be Christian in the public square.
And I'm black as heaven. I'm made in God's image. Nobody can change my settings. Amen. Got off my knees and put an end to my search. It's easy to sell your soul when you don't know what it's worth.